They laughed at me that night. Not the warm kind of laughter that fills a home with comfort, not the gentle chuckle shared between people who love each other. No, this was something else entirely. It was the kind of laugh that makes you feel small, the kind that pushes you into a corner and tells you to stay quiet, the kind that says, you don't matter anymore. I still remember how the overhead light caught the edge of my son's wine glass, how the steam rose from the mashed potatoes in slow, lazy curls, how my granddaughter's fork stopped halfway to her mouth, how my daughter-in-law's smile didn't reach her eyes. That dinner was 3 months ago, and I haven't been the same since. Hello, my name is Ruth Callahan. I'm 72 years old, and I live in a small brick house in Covington, Kentucky, just across the river from Cincinnati, close enough to hear the city breathe, but far enough to have my own garden. My husband built that garden 31 years ago. He planted tomatoes every spring until his hands couldn't grip the trowel anymore. He passed in 2019. Pancreatic cancer. Quick and cruel. I tell you this not for sympathy. I tell you because you need to understand who I was before all of this started. Before my own son looked at me like I was a stranger. Before my daughter-in-law started speaking about me in the third person while I sat right there. Before I began to wonder if maybe, just maybe, they were right about me. Maybe I was losing my mind, but I wasn't. I know that now. Let me go back to the beginning. For 34 years, I worked at Fifth Third Bank. Started as a teller in 1978. Finished as a senior fraud analyst in 2012. In between, I raised a son, married a husband, paid off a mortgage, survived 2 recessions and 1 bypass surgery. My job was simple. I looked for patterns. People think fraud is complicated. They imagine hackers in dark rooms, typing code into glowing screens. But most fraud is quiet. It's a daughter adding her name to her father's account. It's a nephew convincing his aunt to sign just one paper. It's someone you trust saying, "Let me help you with that." I caught hundreds of cases like that. I learned to read the small things. The hesitation in a voice, the way someone's eyes flick to the left when they lie, the gap between what people say and what the numbers show. Numbers don't lie. People do. I retired with a commendation and a cake from the break room, vanilla with buttercream frosting. My coworkers signed a card that said, "To Ruth, the human lie detector, enjoy your peace." Peace. I thought I'd earned it. My son's name is David. He's 47 now, an accountant. He married Linda 12 years ago. They have 1 daughter, my granddaughter, Sophie. She's 11, quiet like her father, watchful like me. David was a good boy growing up, shy, bookish. He liked puzzles and math problems and anything with clear answers. He didn't like uncertainty. When his father got sick, David stopped visiting. I think he couldn't bear to see the man who taught him to ride a bicycle lying in a hospital bed, asking for water in a voice like paper tearing. I didn't blame David for that. I understood. Some people run from pain. Others walk straight into it. I've always been the second kind. After Richard died, David started coming around more. At first, I was grateful. He helped me sort through the paperwork, explain the pension forms, set up automatic payments for the utilities. He brought Linda and Sophie over for Sunday dinners. We carved turkeys at Thanksgiving. We exchanged gifts at Christmas. It felt like family. But Linda was different. She smiled often, but her smiles were performances. She complimented my cooking, but her voice had a slight edge, like she was grading me. She asked about my health with the same tone she used to ask about the weather. Polite, distant, waiting for something. I noticed, but I said nothing. I wanted my son to be happy. I wanted Sophie to know her grandmother. I told myself that Linda just needed time, that she would warm up. Eventually, I was wrong. The trouble started small. Last September, I noticed something odd in my bank statement. A withdrawal of $800. ATM. Downtown branch. September 14th, 3:47 p.m. I hadn't been to that branch in years. I checked my records. I keep a small leather notebook by the phone. Every transaction, every bill, every payment. I've done this since 1985. Old habits from the fraud department. My colleagues used to tease me about it. Ruth's got her ledger. They'd say, if the apocalypse comes, she'll have receipts. September 14th. I looked at my notes. That day, I had a doctor's appointment at 2:00 p.m. Then I picked up groceries at Kroger. Then I came home and made soup. I never left the neighborhood. I never went downtown. I called the bank the next morning. They confirmed the withdrawal. My card. My PIN. No dispute flag. I felt cold. Someone had used my card. Someone who knew my PIN. I didn't want to believe it. I told myself there had to be an explanation. Maybe I'd forgotten. Maybe I'd made a mistake. Maybe I really had driven downtown and my memory just slipped. But then I found more. October 3rd, $500. ATM. Same branch. October 19th, $600. November 2nd, $750. Each time between 300 and 400 in the afternoon. Each time, the downtown branch. Each time I had been somewhere else entirely. Doctor, grocery store, church, home. I wrote everything down. Dates, times, amounts, my whereabouts. I taped the bank statements to notebook pages. I circled the withdrawals in red pen. The total was over $4,000. $4,000 I hadn't spent. I decided to bring it up at Sunday dinner. I thought my family would help me. I thought David would look at the numbers because he loves numbers just like I do, and help me figure out what happened. I thought we would solve this together. I was wrong about that too. November 17th. The dining room table was set with the good dishes, the ones with the blue flowers around the edge. Richard's mother's dishes. I'd made pot roast with carrots and potatoes. David's favorite. Linda had brought wine, a red. She poured herself a large glass before sitting down. Sophie sat across from me. She had her hair in 2 braids. She was wearing a sweater with a small embroidered cat on the pocket. She looked at me and smiled. A real smile. The kind that made me remember why I kept inviting them over. Even when Linda's comments made me tired. We ate in near silence for a while. David talked about work. Linda talked about redecorating their living room. Sophie talked about a book she was reading for school. Then there was a pause. I took a breath. David, I said, I need to talk to you about something. He looked up. Linda's fork paused over her plate. I've been looking at my bank statements. There have been withdrawals I didn't make. Several of them. Over $4,000. The silence was immediate. Heavy. David blinked. Once. Twice. Then he laughed. Mom. He shook his head. Come on. I have the records, I said. I had brought my notebook to the table. I placed it beside my plate. The dates, the times, where I was. It doesn't add up. Linda set down her fork. She looked at David. A look passed between them. Quick. Private. Ruth. Linda said slowly. You're 72. I know how old I am. Do you? She tilted her head. Sympathetic. Practiced. Because honestly, David and I have been worried. You forget things. Little things. Like where you put your keys. Whether you turned off the stove. Last month, you called David Richard twice. I felt my face flush. Yes, I had done that. I had called my son by my dead husband's name. It happens. Grief does strange things to the tongue. That's different, I said. This is money. Real money. Gone. David sighed. He rubbed the bridge of his nose. Mom, the brain changes as we age. It's normal. You probably withdrew the money and just don't remember. I didn't. You think you didn't. I know I didn't. I have proof. Linda laughed, soft, pitying. Ruth, honey, proof from someone who can't remember where she left her reading glasses isn't really proof, is it? The words hit me like a slap. Sophie was staring at her plate. Her shoulders were hunched. She knew something was wrong. Children always know. I tried again. Look at the notebook, please. Just look. David didn't reach for it. Neither did Linda. Mom, David said quietly, I think maybe we should talk to Dr. Harris. Get an evaluation, just to be safe. An evaluation. I repeated the words slowly. For your peace of mind. I looked at my son, at the boy I had raised, at the man who used to bring me flowers on Mother's Day, at the stranger sitting across from me now, refusing to look me in the eye. You think I'm senile. I think you're getting older, and I think we need to make sure you're okay. Linda nodded. It's the responsible thing, Ruth. You wouldn't want something to happen and then find out you couldn't manage your own affairs. Some people in your situation, they need help. They need someone to take over the finances for their own protection. For their own protection. The phrase hung in the air like smoke. I understood then. I understood what this was. This wasn't concern. This wasn't love. This was strategy. I said nothing more that night. I let them finish their pot roast. I served dessert apple pie from the bakery down the street. I hugged Sophie at the door and told her I loved her. I watched their car pull away from the curb. Then I sat at the kitchen table for a long time. The notebook was still there, untouched, unread. Outside, the November wind rattled the old windows. The radiator clicked and hummed. The house felt larger than usual, emptier. I thought about my years at the bank, all those cases I'd solved, all those families torn apart by greed. I used to wonder how it happened, how someone could steal from their own mother, their own father, their own grandmother. Now I knew. It starts with laughter. It starts with doubt. It starts with the words, "You probably just forgot." I stood up and walked to the hall closet. On the top shelf behind the winter scarves and the Christmas decorations, there was a box, a small cardboard box. Inside were my old work files, handwritten notes, case studies, the methods I used to catch liars and thieves for 34 years. I pulled the box down and carried it to the kitchen table. I opened my notebook to a fresh page, and I began to write. They thought I was an old woman losing her grip on reality. They thought I would crumble, apologize, let them take control. They didn't know me at all. I have spent my life finding the truth hidden inside numbers. I have unraveled lies for a living. I have stared across tables at men in expensive suits who swore they'd done nothing wrong, and I found the receipts that proved otherwise. My own son thought he could gaslight me into silence. My own daughter-in-law thought I would surrender my dignity without a fight. They were wrong. This was not the end of my story. This was the beginning. The first thing that moved was my glasses. I know how that sounds. An old woman complaining about misplaced glasses. You're probably thinking, that's what old people do. They lose things. But I don't lose things. I put my glasses on the nightstand every night, left side, next to the lamp and the small clock radio Richard gave me in 1993. I have done this for 29 years. It is not a habit I forget. On November 19th, 2 days after that dinner, I woke up and my glasses were gone. I searched for 20 minutes. Under the bed, behind the dresser, in the bathroom, nothing. I found them in the kitchen, on top of the refrigerator. I am 5'4". I cannot reach the top of my refrigerator without a step stool. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe I'd been sleepwalking. Maybe I'd had a strange night and simply didn't remember. But then, the keys disappeared. I keep my house keys on a small hook by the back door, always, for 40 years. That hook has held those keys through 3 presidencies, 2 kitchen renovations, and 1 flood in the basement. November 22nd. The keys were not on the hook. I found them inside a bag of flour in the pantry. You understand what was happening, don't you? Someone was moving my things. Someone was making me look confused. Someone was building a case, and I was starting to believe it. That's the cruelest part of gaslighting. It doesn't just make others doubt you, it makes you doubt yourself. I stood in my kitchen that morning, holding my flour-dusted keys, and I thought, what if they're right? What if I really am slipping? The thought made me sick. 3 days later, Linda called. She never calls me directly. She texts, sometimes, short messages. Functional. Dinner at 6. Sophie has a cold, running late. But that morning, she called. Ruth, how are you feeling? Her voice was soft, concerned. It made my skin prickle. I'm fine, Linda. Are you sure? David mentioned you seemed off at dinner. We've been worried. I'm not off. I'm trying to figure out what happened to my money. A pause, then a sigh. Ruth, honey, we talked about this. You need to accept that your memory isn't what it used to be. It's okay. It happens to everyone eventually. My memory is fine. Is it? Another pause. Because David told me you called him 3 times yesterday. Each time you asked the same question about the bank. He had to explain the same thing over and over. I had not called David 3 times. I had called him once. In the morning, he hadn't answered. That's not true, I said. Ruth, Linda's voice dropped. Patient, pitying. This is exactly what we mean. You don't remember things. You think you do, but you don't. That's the disease. It tricks you. I don't have a disease. Not yet. But early intervention is important. That's why we made you an appointment. My stomach dropped. What appointment? With Dr. Harris. Tomorrow at 200. David will pick you up. We just want to make sure you're okay. For everyone's peace of mind. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed and stared at the ceiling and listened to the old house creak around me. The wind outside. The distant hum of a car passing on the road. The sound of my own heartbeat. I thought about my mother. She had Alzheimer's. Real Alzheimer's. The kind that steals your name first, then your children's faces, then your ability to swallow. I watched her disappear over 7 years. By the end, she didn't know who I was. She called me the nice lady and asked when her daughter was coming to visit. I know what memory loss looks like. I know its shape and its smell and its terrible patience. This was not that. But how do you prove you're sane to people who've already decided you're not? David picked me up at 1:30. He didn't come inside. He honked from the driveway. 2 short beeps, like I was a teenager being picked up for school. I got in the car. He didn't look at me. How are you, Mom? I'd be better if you believed me. He said nothing. He turned on the radio. Classic rock. The Eagles. Take it easy. I watched the familiar streets pass. The pharmacy where I'd filled Richard's prescriptions. The church where we'd held his funeral. The elementary school where David had learned to read. This town held my whole life. And now, it felt like a trap. Dr. Harris's office was in a beige building near the hospital. 3rd floor, suite 304. I had been coming here for 8 years. Annual checkups, blood pressure monitoring, the usual concerns of a woman my age. Dr. Harris was a kind man, 60s, gray beard, glasses that made him look like a tired professor. He had always treated me with respect. But today, Linda was there. She was sitting in the waiting room when we arrived. She stood up and smiled. Ruth, you look tired. Did you sleep okay? I slept fine. She tilted her head. You have circles under your eyes. David, doesn't she look pale? David shrugged. A little, maybe. They were doing it again. Talking about me like I wasn't there. Building the picture. painting me gray. The examination room was cold, white walls, paper-covered table, a poster about heart health, a blood pressure cuff hanging from a hook. Dr. Harris came in with a clipboard. He shook my hand. "Ruth, good to see you. How are you feeling?" Before I could answer, Linda spoke. "Doctor, we've been really concerned. She's been confused lately, forgetting things, misplacing items, repeating herself. We think it might be time for a cognitive evaluation." Dr. Harris looked at me. "Ruth, is this true?" "No," I said. "I've been having some issues with my bank account, unauthorized withdrawals. I've been trying to investigate, and my family seems to think that means I'm losing my mind." Linda laughed softly. "See, this is what I mean. She's convinced someone is stealing from her. It's classic paranoia. Early-stage dementia often presents this way." "I'm not paranoid. I have records. Records she made herself," Linda said to the doctor, "which doesn't really prove anything, does it? She could have written anything in that notebook." I felt heat rise in my chest. I worked in fraud detection for 34 years. I know how to document evidence. 34 years ago, Linda said gently. "Things change, Ruth. Minds change." Dr. Harris held up a hand. "Let's slow down. Ruth, I'd like to ask you a few questions. Standard cognitive screening. Is that okay?" I nodded. He asked me the date. I told him, November 26th. He asked me the day of the week, Tuesday. He asked me who the president was. I answered correctly. He asked me to count backward from 100 by sevens. I did it without hesitation. 100, 93, 86, 79, 72, 65. He asked me to remember 3 words: apple, table, penny. 5 minutes later, he asked me to repeat them. I did. He asked me to draw a clock showing 10:10. I drew it perfectly. Dr. Harris looked at his clipboard, then at me, then at Linda. "Her cognitive function appears normal," he said. Linda's smile flickered. "Just for a moment. Doctor, you have to understand. She has good days and bad days. Today is a good day, but last week, she couldn't find her own keys. She left her glasses on top of the refrigerator. She called David multiple times asking the same question. I did not," I said. "You don't remember," Linda said. "That's the point." Dr. Harris frowned. "Ruth, do you feel like your memory has been unreliable lately?" I hesitated. This was the trap. If I said no, Linda would say I was in denial. If I said yes, they would use it against me. "I feel like someone is trying to make me look unreliable," I said carefully. "And I think that's very different from actually being unreliable." Linda's eyes went hard, just for a second. Then the mask came back. "Doctor, we're just trying to protect her. She has significant assets. If she's not competent to manage them, someone needs to step in. We'd like to discuss power of attorney." The room went cold. Power of attorney. There it was. The real reason for this visit. Dr. Harris looked uncomfortable. "That's a legal matter," he said. "I can't make that determination based on one visit. If you're concerned, I can refer Ruth to a neuropsychologist for a comprehensive evaluation." "That would be wonderful," Linda said. "The sooner, the better." I sat there, silent, my hands folded in my lap. I understood now. I understood completely. This wasn't about my health. This wasn't about protecting me. This was about control. They wanted my accounts, my house, my pension, and the easiest way to get it was to prove I couldn't manage it myself. On the drive home, no one spoke. David kept his eyes on the road. Linda sat in the back seat, scrolling through her phone. I watched the trees pass. Bare branches, gray sky, November in Kentucky. When we pulled into my driveway, I opened the door before the car fully stopped. "Mom," David said, "we're just trying to help." I turned and looked at him. My son. My only child. Are you? I asked. He didn't answer. I walked into my house and closed the door behind me. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with my notebook. I wrote down everything. The glasses on the refrigerator, the keys in the flower, Linda's phone call, the doctor's visit, the words power of attorney. I wrote until my hand cramped. Then I closed the notebook and stared at the wall. They were building a frame around me, piece by piece. Evidence of confusion, evidence of instability. They were constructing a story in which I was the problem, the burden, the obstacle. And if I didn't act soon, they would finish that frame. They would lock me inside it. I thought about the bank. I thought about my old office, the fluorescent lights, the smell of coffee and ink, the rows of filing cabinets filled with case files. I thought about the patterns I used to find, the way fraud always follows the same shape, the way criminals always underestimate the paper trail. My family had underestimated me too. They saw an old woman in a cardigan. They saw gray hair and reading glasses and a slow walk. They didn't see the analyst. They didn't see the 34 years of catching liars. They didn't know what I was capable of. I made a decision that night. I would not defend myself with words. Words could be twisted. Words could be dismissed. I would defend myself with evidence. I would go to the bank. I would request the records. I would find the proof that someone else had accessed my account. And then I would show them exactly who Ruth Callahan was. The wind rattled my windows. The radiator clicked. Somewhere outside, a dog barked once and fell silent. I turned off the kitchen light and climbed the stairs to bed. Tomorrow, I would begin. I woke before dawn. The house was still, dark, the kind of quiet that makes you aware of your own breathing. I lay there for a moment, staring at the ceiling. My back ached from a restless night. My eyes felt dry. But my mind was clear, clearer than it had been in weeks. I had a plan now, and that changed everything. I showered, dressed carefully, navy slacks, a cream blouse, my good wool coat, the one Richard bought me for our 40th anniversary. I put on lipstick for the first time in months, a soft rose color. I looked at myself in the hallway mirror. An old woman stared back. Gray hair pinned neatly, glasses clean, shoulders straight. She didn't look confused. She looked ready. The Fifth Third Bank downtown branch opened at 9:00 a.m. I arrived at 8:47. I sat in my car in the parking lot and watched the employees arrive. Young people in dark suits, coffee cups in hand, phones pressed to ears. They moved quickly, efficiently, the way I used to move. Once. At 902, I walked through the front doors. The lobby smelled the same. That particular bank smelled paper and carpet cleaner, and the faint hum of money changing hands. I had spent half my life in buildings like this. The marble floors, the brass fixtures, the false warmth of recessed lighting. I knew this world. It knew me, too. The young woman at the front desk smiled. Professional. Automatic. Good morning. How can I help you today? I'd like to speak with a manager, I said. About my account. Of course. Do you have an appointment? No. But I've been a customer here for 41 years. And I used to work for this bank. Fraud department. Retired in 2012. Her smile shifted. Became more genuine. More curious. Let me see who's available. She picked up the phone. Spoke quietly. Nodded. Mr. Patterson can see you. Third office on the left. Mr. Patterson was young, maybe 35. Crisp white shirt, blue tie, a wedding ring that still looked new. He stood when I entered and shook my hand firmly. Mrs. Callahan, please sit down. I understand you have concerns about your account. I do. I sat, placed my notebook on his desk, opened it to the page I had prepared. Over the past 3 months, there have been multiple ATM withdrawals from my account. Withdrawals I did not make. The total exceeds $4,000. He nodded slowly. His face was careful, neutral. I see. And you're certain you didn't make these withdrawals? I'm certain. Sometimes with busy schedules, it's easy to forget. Mr. Patterson. I kept my voice calm. I worked in fraud detection for 34 years. I know the difference between forgetting and theft. He paused, looked at me more closely. You worked here? In fraud? Until 2012. I trained half the analysts in this building. Something shifted in his expression. Respect, maybe, or at least attention. What would you like me to do, Miss Callahan? I want to see the access logs for my account, device information, IP addresses, and if possible, I want to see the ATM footage from the dates of the withdrawals. He hesitated. That's a significant request. There are privacy protocols. We'd need to verify. I'm not asking you to give me someone else's information. I'm asking about my own account, my own money. I have every right to know who accessed it and how. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he picked up his phone. Let me make a call. 20 minutes later, I was sitting in a small conference room. The walls were bare except for a single framed photograph of the Cincinnati skyline. The table was polished wood. A computer monitor sat at one end. Mr. Patterson returned with a woman I didn't recognize. Younger than him, dark hair pulled back, sharp eyes. Miss Callahan, this is Sarah Chen. She's one of our senior fraud analysts. Sarah Chen. The name meant nothing to me, but when she sat down across from me, I saw something familiar in her posture, the straightness of her spine, the way her fingers rested on the keyboard, the focus in her gaze. She was like me, decades younger, but cut from the same cloth. Miss Callahan, she said, I pulled your account record. I have to say, this is unusual. Unusual how? She turned the monitor toward me. The withdrawals you flagged, they all occurred between 300 and 400 p.m., all from the same ATM, downtown branch. Your card was used. Your PIN was entered correctly on the first try. I didn't make those withdrawals. I believe you. The words hit me like cold water. For weeks, no one had believed me. Why? I asked. Sarah Chen pointed to a line on the screen. Because the device that accessed your online banking before each withdrawal, it's not registered to you. It's a different phone, different IP address. Someone logged into your account remotely, checked your balance, and then within an hour made a cash withdrawal. I stared at the screen. The numbers blurred for a moment, then sharpened. Can you tell me whose device it was? Not directly, but I can tell you the IP traces back to a residential address in northern Kentucky. And the login pattern suggests someone who knew your account well, someone who had access to your credentials. The room felt smaller suddenly, tighter. I knew what she was saying. She didn't have to spell it out. Someone close to me, someone with access, family. There's something else, Sarah said. She clicked to another screen. A grainy black and white image appeared. ATM footage. I leaned forward. The timestamp read September 14th, 3:47 p.m. A figure stood at the machine, back to the camera. Dark jacket, baseball cap pulled low. But I knew that posture. I knew those shoulders. I had watched them grow from boyhood. David, I don't remember what I said next. I think I thanked them. I think I shook hands. I think I walked out of the building and got into my car. But I don't remember the drive home. I only remember sitting in my driveway, engine off, hands still on the wheel, staring at nothing. My son. My only child. The boy I had held in the hospital room the day he was born. The boy who had cried when he lost his first tooth. The boy who had stood beside me at his father's funeral, silent and pale. That boy had stolen from me. I sat there for a long time. The sun moved across the sky. The shadows lengthened. A neighbor walked by with a dog. She waved. I didn't wave back. I thought about the years. The late nights at work when David was small. The school plays I missed. The dinners I was too tired to cook. The The distance that grew between us like ivy on a wall, slow, quiet, impossible to stop. I had told myself I was providing for him, building a future, securing his education, his safety, his life. But maybe he had seen it differently. Maybe to him, I was never really there. I went inside. The house was cold. I hadn't turned on the heat before leaving. I made tea, sat at the kitchen table, wrapped my hands around the warm cup. The notebook was still there, open to the page where I had written my plan. I looked at the words I had written the night before. Find the evidence. Prove the truth. I had found it. I had proved it, but I hadn't expected the truth to hurt this much. The phone rang at 6:00 p.m. I let it ring 4 times before answering. Mom? David's voice, casual, light. Just checking in. How was your day? I closed my eyes. Fine. Good. Linda wanted me to remind you about the neuropsych appointment. It's scheduled for next Monday, 1000 a.m. I remember. Great. A pause. You sound tired. Are you okay? I opened my eyes, looked at the notebook. I'm fine, David. Okay. Well, get some rest. We'll talk soon. He hung up. I set the phone down. My hands were shaking. That night, I dreamed of Richard. He was standing in the garden, young, strong, the way he looked when we first moved into this house. He was planting tomatoes. His hands were covered in dirt. He looked up at me and smiled. Ruth, he said, you always knew how to find the truth. I found it, I told him, but I don't know what to do with it. He wiped his hands on his jeans, walked toward me. Yes, you do. I woke up crying. The next morning, I made a decision. I couldn't confront David. Not yet. Not without more evidence. Not without understanding the full picture. Linda was involved too. I was certain of it. The phone calls, the gaslighting, the push for power of attorney. She was the architect. David was just the hands. I needed to know how deep this went. I needed to see everything. I called the bank again. Sarah Chen answered. Mrs. Callahan, I was hoping you'd call. I need more, I said. The full transaction history, every login, every device, every attempt, successful or not. I can do that, but Mrs. Callahan, you should know. If this goes to law enforcement, it becomes a criminal matter. Are you prepared for that? I thought about David's face, about the boy he used to be. Then I thought about my empty account, my manipulated memories, my dignity, stripped away piece by piece. Yes, I said. I'm prepared. I hung up the phone. The house was silent. I walked to the window and looked out at the garden. The tomato cages were still there, rusted and empty. Richard had been gone for 5 years. The garden had been dead for 4. But I was still here, still standing, and I was done being a victim. Tomorrow, I would gather everything. Tomorrow, I would build my case. And when the time came, I would show them all exactly what happens when you underestimate Ruth Callahan. Chapter 4. The Confrontation. December 3rd. I had the evidence. Every login, every device ID, every failed voice authentication attempt, every ATM photograph. Sarah Chen had printed it all. 47 pages. Time-stamped. Verified. Undeniable. I sat at my kitchen table and spread the papers out like a map of betrayal. The doorbell rang at 6:15 p.m. I had invited them. Sunday dinner. One last time. I heard Linda's voice before I opened the door. I don't know why she insists on cooking. She's going to burn the house down one of these days. I opened the door. Linda's smile appeared instantly. Automatic. False. Ruth, something smells wonderful. David stood behind her. Sophie was holding his hand. She looked up at me with those quiet eyes. Hi, Grandma. Hello, sweetheart. I stepped aside to let them in. Dinner was roast chicken. I had made it carefully. Rosemary, lemon, garlic, Richard's recipe. We sat in the dining room. The good dishes again. The blue flowers around the edges. Linda poured herself wine immediately. David cut his meat into small, precise squares. Sophie ate quietly, watching everyone. "This is delicious, Ruth," Linda said. "I'm impressed. You remembered to turn off the oven this time." I said nothing. "How are you feeling?" David asked. "Ready for the appointment tomorrow?" The neuropsych evaluation. They were still pushing it. "Actually," I said, "I'd like to talk about something else tonight." Linda's fork paused, just for a second. "Oh? What's that?" "My bank account." The silence was immediate. David's jaw tightened. Linda's smile stayed frozen. "Mom," David's voice was careful, controlled. "We've been over this." "No, we haven't." I pushed my plate aside. "We've talked about my memory, my confusion, my so-called paranoia, but we haven't talked about the truth." Linda laughed softly. "Ruth, honey, don't." My voice was steady. "Don't honey me. I know what you did." The room went cold. Sophie looked up. Her fork hung in midair. "What are you talking about?" David asked. I stood, walked to the sideboard, picked up the manila folder I had placed there earlier. I set it on the table between us. "Open it." David didn't move. Linda reached for the folder. Her fingers hesitated over the edge. "What is this?" "Evidence." She opened it. I watched her face change. The color drained slowly, like water swirling down a sink. "This is..." She flipped through the pages. "Where did you get this?" "The bank." I requested my own records, device logs, IP addresses, ATM footage. I paused. "You can see the timestamps. You can see the location data. You can see the photographs." David grabbed the folder from Linda. His hands were shaking now. "Mom, this doesn't prove anything." "Page 12, I said. "ATM camera. September 14th, 3:47 p.m. He turned to the page. His own face stared back at him. Grainy, black and white, but unmistakable. The room was silent for 10 seconds. 20. 30. Then Linda spoke. "So what?" Her voice was sharp now. The mask was slipping, so David made a few withdrawals. "You're his mother. It's family money. It's my money. You wouldn't even notice it was gone if you weren't so paranoid. We were going to pay it back eventually." "When? After you had me declared incompetent? After you took power of attorney?" Linda's eyes flashed. "We were trying to protect you." "From what?" "From yourself." She slammed her palm on the table. Sophie flinched. "You're old, Ruth. You're confused. You can't manage your own life anymore. Someone has to step in before you lose everything." "I'm not confused. I never was. That's what confused people always say." I turned to David. He was staring at the photograph. His own face. His own crime. "David." He didn't look up. "David, look at me." Slowly he raised his eyes. I had expected anger, defiance, maybe even more lies. But what I saw was worse. I saw nothing. His face was blank. Empty, like a window with the blinds pulled down. "Why?" I asked. He said nothing. "I raised you. I worked double shifts so you could go to college. I sat with you when you had nightmares. I taught you to ride a bike, to tie your shoes, to balance a checkbook." My voice cracked. "Why would you do this to me?" Still nothing. Linda answered instead. "Because you owed him." I turned to her. "Excuse me?" "You heard me." Linda's voice was venom now. "You owed him. For all those years you weren't there. For all those times you chose work over your own son. For making him feel like he was never enough. I was providing for him. You were hiding. You buried yourself in that bank because you didn't know how to be a mother. And David suffered for it. Every single day." I looked at David. "Is that what you believe?" He swallowed. His Adam's apple moved up and down. "You were never there, Mom." His voice was quiet, flat. "Not really. Even when you were home, you were thinking about work, about cases, about patterns and numbers. I was just background noise. The words hit me like stones, one after another, each one landing somewhere deep. I wanted to argue, to defend myself, to explain that I had done everything for him, but I couldn't speak. Because part of me wondered if he was right. Sophie's voice cut through the silence. "Stop it." Everyone turned. She was standing now. Her small hands were balled into fists. Her eyes were wet. "Stop being mean to Grandma." "Sophie, sit down," Linda said. "No." The girl's voice shook, but she didn't move. "Grandma didn't do anything wrong. She's nice. She's the only one who listens to me." "Sophie, you're the ones who are always mad. You're the ones who talk about her like she's not there. I hear you at night, saying she's crazy, saying you want her money. I'm not stupid." The room went silent again. Linda's face turned white, then red. "Sophie, go to the car. Now." "No, now." Sophie looked at me. Her eyes were full of tears. And something else, something fierce. "I'm sorry, Grandma," she whispered. "I should have told you sooner." Then she ran. The front door slammed behind her. I stood there. My legs felt weak. My chest felt hollow. Linda was gathering her purse, grabbing her coat. "This conversation is over. David, let's go." David stood slowly. He still wouldn't look at me. "David," my voice was barely a whisper now. "Please." He paused at the doorway. For one moment, I thought he might turn around, might say something, might apologize. Instead, he said, "You should have just forgotten, Mom. It would have been easier for everyone." Then he walked out. I stood alone in my dining room. The roast chicken was cold. The candles were burning low. The folder lay open on the table, pages scattered like fallen leaves. I sat down, and for the first time in weeks, I cried. Not because I was sad, not because I was scared, because I finally understood. My son didn't steal from me because he needed money. He stole from me because he wanted me to disappear. I cried until there were no tears left. Then I wiped my face, straightened my blouse, picked up the scattered papers. Sophie's words echoed in my mind. "I hear you at night, saying she's crazy, saying you want her money." That child had seen everything, heard everything, and still, she had stood up for me. She was 11 years old, and she was braver than any adult in that room. I made another decision that night. No more waiting. No more hoping. No more chances. Tomorrow, I would call a lawyer. Tomorrow, I would press charges. Tomorrow, I would take my life back. The house was quiet. The candles had burned out. I sat in the dark for a long time, listening to the silence. Then I got up and began to prepare. The courthouse smelled like old wood and floor polish. I remember that detail clearly, the way the morning light came through the tall windows, the way my heels clicked against the marble floor, the way my lawyer, Patricia Morrison, walked beside me with a folder pressed against her chest. I remember thinking, this is what justice looks like. Quiet, ordinary, just another Tuesday morning in America. The hearing lasted 47 minutes. I won't bore you with the legal details. The evidence spoke for itself. The device logs, the IP addresses, the ATM footage, the failed voice authentication attempts, the pattern of withdrawals that coincided perfectly with David and Linda's financial troubles. Patricia presented everything in order, clean, precise, undeniable. David sat at the other table with his public defender. He never looked at me, not once. Linda wasn't there. She had filed for divorce 2 weeks earlier, moved back to Indiana, took half of everything David had left. The judge was a woman in her 60s, gray hair, sharp eyes. She reminded me of myself somehow. When she delivered her ruling, Her voice was calm. The evidence clearly establishes a pattern of financial exploitation. The defendant knowingly accessed the plaintiff's accounts without authorization and withdrew funds totaling $4,847. This court orders full restitution and places the defendant on 3 years probation. David's shoulders dropped, just slightly. That was all. I walked out of the courthouse into the December sun. The air was cold and clean. A light snow had fallen overnight, and the city looked softer than usual, quieter. Patricia touched my arm. "How do you feel?" I thought about the question. "Tired," I said, "but lighter." She nodded. "You did the right thing, Ruth." "Did I?" I still wonder about that sometimes. The weeks after the hearing passed slowly. I stayed in my house, the same house Richard and I had bought 41 years ago, the same kitchen where I had fed David his first solid food, the same garden where we had planted tomatoes every spring. But the house felt different now. Emptier. Not in a sad way, just different. I spent a lot of time sitting by the window, watching the birds at the feeder, drinking tea, thinking. I thought about David, not the man who had stolen from me, not the stranger who had looked at me with empty eyes and said I should have just forgotten. I thought about the boy, the one who used to climb into my bed during thunderstorms, the one who drew me pictures of rockets and dinosaurs, the one who held my hand at Richard's funeral and didn't let go for 3 hours. Where did that boy go? When did he become someone who could hurt me like this? I don't have easy answers. I wish I did. I wish I could tell you that I understand exactly what went wrong, that I can point to one moment, one mistake, one failure and say, there. That's where it all fell apart. But life doesn't work that way. People are complicated. Families are complicated. Love is complicated. I know I wasn't a perfect mother. I worked too much. I was tired too often. I probably said, "Not now," when I should have said, "Tell me everything." But I also know this. My imperfections did not give my son permission to steal from me. My absences did not justify his betrayal. We are all responsible for our own choices. David made his, and I made mine. In January, I put the house on the market. It sold in 3 weeks. A young couple from Chicago. They had a baby on the way and talked excitedly about the garden, about the good schools nearby, about the big backyard where their children could play. I signed the papers and handed over the keys. Then I drove away without looking back. I moved to a small town on the coast of North Carolina, Beaufort. Population 4,000. 1 main street, 2 stoplights, a harbor full of fishing boats, and the constant smell of salt in the air. I rented a cottage 3 blocks from the water. White clapboard, blue shutters, a porch with 2 rocking chairs. Richard would have loved it here. My days are simple now. I wake early, watch the sunrise, make coffee, walk to the harbor and back. I read books I never had time for. Mysteries, mostly. Ruth Rendell, Tana French. Writers who understand that the darkest crimes happen in ordinary houses, between people who are supposed to love each other. I eat lunch at the same cafe every day. The woman who runs it is named Dorothy. She's 78. She tells me about her grandchildren and never asks why I moved here alone. In the afternoons, I sit on my porch and listen to the waves. The ocean sounds different than I expected. Not dramatic, not roaring, just steady, patient, endless. It reminds me that the world is much larger than my pain. Sophie writes to me, real letters, on paper, in purple ink. She sends them every 2 weeks. She tells me about school, about her friends, about the book she's reading, about the cat she's trying to convince her father to adopt. She never mentions Linda, never mentions the trial, never mentions that terrible dinner. She just writes about her life. Small things, Ordinary things. I write back every time. I tell her about the pelicans that gather on the pier, about the old man who sells shrimp from a cooler on the dock, about the way the sky turns pink and orange at sunset. I tell her I'm proud of her. I tell her I love her. I tell her that being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you do the right thing even when you are. David hasn't contacted me. I don't know if he ever will. Sometimes I imagine what I would say if he did. If he called one day, if he showed up at my door, would I forgive him? I don't know. Forgiveness is a strange thing. People talk about it like it's a single decision, like you just choose to let go and then it's done. But it's not like that. Not really. Forgiveness is a process, a daily practice. Some days I feel closer to it. Other days the anger comes back, sharp and sudden, and I have to breathe through it. I'm not there yet, but I'm trying. What I do know is this. I am not defined by what my son did to me. I am not defined by my age, or my gray hair, or the wrinkles on my hands. I am not the confused old woman they tried to make me. I am Ruth Callahan. I am 72 years old. I spent 34 years catching liars for a living. And when my own family tried to erase me, I fought back. Not with anger, not with hatred, with patience, with evidence, with the quiet certainty that the truth always finds its way to the surface. There's a lesson in my story, I think. It's not about money. It's not even about fraud. It's about dignity. It's about the right to be believed, the right to be seen, the right to exist as a full human being. No matter how old you are, when someone tries to take that from you, whether it's a stranger or your own child, you have to fight for it. You have to plant your feet and say, no, I know who I am. You don't get to rewrite my story. That's what I did, and I would do it again. The sun is setting now. I'm sitting on my porch with a cup of tea. The sky is turning purple and gold. The waves are whispering against the shore. Somewhere out there, Sophie is doing her homework. Dorothy is closing up the cafe. A fishing boat is heading home with the day's catch. And I am here, alive, free, at peace. Not because my story had a perfect ending, but because I chose to keep writing it. Thank you for listening. I mean that. Truly. I know my story isn't easy. I know it might have stirred up memories of your own. Maybe someone in your life tried to make you feel small. Maybe you're going through something right now that makes you doubt yourself. If that's you, I want you to know you're not alone and you're not crazy. Trust yourself. Write things down. Keep records. Find people who believe you. The truth always comes out. Always. If this story meant something to you, I hope you'll subscribe to this channel. Hit the like button. Turn on notifications so you don't miss what comes next. And if you have a story of your own, a moment when you had to fight for your dignity, leave it in the comments. I'd love to hear it. We're all in this together. The tide goes out, the tide comes in, and we keep going.